Russia's long previewed invasion of Ukraine has begun, and so too has our response. Today, the President responded swiftly and in lockstep with allies and partners. The speed and coordination was historic. In previous sanctions regimes, it took weeks and months to mount a decisive response. This time, we announced our first tranche of sanctions in less than a day, and in lockstep with allies and partners in the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, and Australia. Let me say a few words about the details of the package. First, hello. There's no easy segue from that. Close your ears. First, after consultations overnight with Germany, Russia's Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline will not become operational. That's an $11 billion investment in a prized gas pipeline controlled by Russia that will now go to waste, and it sacrifices what would have been a cash cow for Russia's coffers. But it's not just about the money. This decision will relieve Russia's geostrategic chokehold over Europe through its supply of gas, and it's a major turning point in the world's energy independence from Russia. Second, we've demonstrated the potency of our financial sanctions. And make no mistake, this is only the sharp edge of the pain we can inflict. In lockstep with our allies, we're fully blocking from the global financial system the fifth largest Russian financial institution, VEB. This is a glorified piggy bank for the Kremlin that holds more than $50 billion in assets. We're also fully blocking Pramvaya's bank. This is a bank that holds $35 billion in assets that finances the activities of the Russian military. In plain English, full block means these banks can no longer make any transactions with the US, nor with Europe, as Europe matched our actions, and their assets in our respective financial systems will be frozen. And let me be totally clear, no Russian financial institution is safe if the invasion proceeds. We are ready to press a button to take action on the two largest Russian financial institutions, which collectively hold almost $750 billion in assets, or more than half of the total in the Russian banking system. Third, together with our allies, we've also cut off the Russian government, the Russian central bank, and Russian sovereign wealth funds from new financing from the US and Europe. The Kremlin can no longer raise money from the US or Europe, and its new debt can no longer trade on US or European financial markets. Fourth, we've fully sanctioned a group of Russian elites and their family members. These individuals share in the corrupt gains of the Kremlin, and they will now share in the pain. Other Russian elites and their family members are now on notice that additional actions could be taken on them as well. I also want to take a minute to address a key part of the President's speech on energy markets. We were deliberate to direct the pain of our sanctions towards the Russian economy, not ours. None of our measures are designed to disrupt the flow of energy to global markets, and we are now executing a plan in coordination with major oil producers and major oil consumers to secure the stability of global energy supplies. Let me just end where I started. This was the beginning of an invasion, and this is the beginning of our response. The actions we took today were only the first tranche. If Putin escalates further, we will escalate further, using financial sanctions and export controls, which we've yet to unveil, but which are fully prepared to implement with allies and partners across the world. Lastly, make no mistake, our response goes well beyond sanctions and export controls. We're continuing to fortify NATO's eastern flank to reinforce a sacred Article 5 commitment to defend every inch of NATO territory. Just today, the President announced that additional troops and equipment will be shifted within Europe to the Baltics. We'll continue to provide defensive assistance to Ukraine. Already over the past year, we provided $650 billion to this effect, the most of any year. And we'll continue to work with allies and partners to provide economic assistance to Ukraine, with the idea being we want to create a successful alternative in Ukraine to Russian-style kleptocracy, which may be Putin's greatest fear of all.
Josh?
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Can you speak a little bit more about the energy component? What tools do you have in the tool chest, given that there's been an effort ongoing now for several months to control the price increases that we're seeing for gasoline in particular? What can you do to help energy prices not bite the way that President Biden appears to worry that they will?
Yeah. So this is an ongoing effort and a sensitive effort. I can give you a bit of detail on what that involves. Number one, it involves coordinating our actions with major energy producers. We all have reserves at our disposal, and those reserves could help support the supply of energy worldwide. Number two, we're working closely with major energy producers. Several of them have the spare capacity to provide supply to global energy markets and to balance the market in the event of any supply disruption. Number three, we can work with energy companies to surge their capacity to supply energy to the market, particularly as prices rise. And number four, we can be very clear that if President Putin weaponizes energy supply, it will be met with massive consequences, and it will only accelerate the diversification of Europe and the world away from Russian energy.
Can you speak quickly to the decision to what seems to be delinking the sanctions? Initially, the president was signaling if there is an invasion or a further invasion, that the sanctions would come full stop, one swoop. Now we're seeing sort of more of a tit-for-tat approach. You're warning here today that if President Putin goes further, so will the sanctions. Can you walk us through that process at all? It seems like the U.S. is now breaking its sanctions package into chunks, whereas the expectation had been that it would come all at once.
Yeah, well, look, today's package is a severe action. I walked through the elements of it with Nord Stream, the financial sanctions, sovereign debt, and the elites. Number two, it's just the beginning. This was the beginning of an invasion. This is just the beginning of our response. But number three, and this really gets to your question, I think, most fundamentally, no one should think that it's our goal to max out on sanctions. Sanctions are not an end to themselves. They serve a higher purpose, and that purpose is to deter and prevent. They're meant to prevent and deter a large-scale invasion of Ukraine that could involve the seizure of major cities, including Kyiv. They're meant to prevent large-scale human suffering that could involve tens of thousands of casualties in a conflict. And they're meant to prevent the installation of a puppet government controlled by Moscow that subjugates the will of Ukraine and prevents the people of Ukraine from choosing their own destiny and setting their own course. That's what this is all about.
What's it going to take to target Putin directly?
I'm not going to telegraph exactly what it would take and under what circumstances that would occur, but no option is off the table, as the president said.
But the EU president said today this is the most dangerous moment in European security in a generation. So if not today, when? What?
Look, as I say, we mounted a very significant response today. We can escalate that response further. There are a number of actions we can take using financial sanctions, export controls, fortifying our eastern flank, helping Ukraine defend itself, helping each other deal with the costs and consequences of Russia's invasion, and most importantly, having a shared confidence among allies in our way of life, our economic model, our political model. If Russia wants to sequester itself from Western technology, the Western economy, and from Western financial markets, that is a bad strategic choice for Russia. But we're going to step up in solidarity to advance our values and principles.
Thanks. You mentioned that sanctions are meant to deter and prevent, but the fact of the matter is the sanctions you're announcing today and announced last night did not deter or prevent Russia's actions yesterday and over the weekend. What gives you any confidence that the remaining sanctions that haven't been imposed yet can deter or prevent a further Russian invasion and aggression in Ukraine?
Well, look, it's day one, and President Putin has choices to make. We have choices to make. Our job is to manage risks and to impose consequences for a further escalation of this conflict by President Putin. We can do that through financial sanctions. We can do that through export controls. We can do that through fortifying NATO's eastern flank. We can do that through providing defensive assistance to Ukraine. We can do that by being prepared for any energy market impact that occurs from Russia's choices. Those are the choices that are within our disposal. And let me just take a step back and talk about sanctions. You know, we have principles that matter in terms of how we design a sanctions package. They need to be powerful enough to demonstrate our resolve and the capacity to impose overwhelming costs. They should be calibrated such that we can maximize coordination with our allies and partners. They should maintain flexibility so we can escalate or de-escalate depending on what Putin does. They should be responsible so that we avoid unwanted spillovers to the U.S. and global economy. And they need to be sustainable. They work over time, not on day one.
We just got to do the last one. Okay.
Can you tell us why Putin himself was not sanctioned? I know
we
you tried to
just gonna
explain
ask
it
questions.
because
Simon,
what you are doing is like...
You got a question last week, so we're just trying to diversify it a little bit.
I just want him to clarify.
Simon, can you let Weija ask a question? Thank you. Go ahead, Weija.
Thank you. I know that you just talked about all the actions that you're taking to counter any oil shortages that might drive up gas prices. But today, the president himself was very blunt about how they could impact Americans. So can you just give us a sense of when Americans might feel a difference when they fill up their gas tanks? And then secondly, to follow up on what Zeke was just asking, both you and the president said today that these sanctions will be in response, will be, if Putin escalates, you will escalate. So that sounds like they are going to be in response now and not meant to deter. So do you still view them as being a deterrence, or are they just a punishment at this point?
Yeah, so the first question on energy markets and the impact of our actions and when they'll take effect in markets. Look, again, I don't want to go into specifics, but there are actions that energy consumers can take with their strategic reserves. There are actions that energy producers can take in terms of their spare capacity. There are actions that energy producers can undertake to increase their production of energy in the current circumstance. And I'm not going to give you a timeline, but the collective power of those actions and all the other tools and authorities that are at our disposal, plus diplomatic maneuvers that are at our disposal, collectively, we think will be effective in bringing down the price of gas and the price of oil.
Daleep, he will come back, I promise, and I promised he would.